the light, the light. Well, it would blind me if I didn't have these like nifty specs on and everything. But clearly, if you are looking at the eclipse, that's all you can see. And so we're going to concentrate on that tonight on the Mosaic Arc. Welcome. Oh, I have to look, there, now I'm blind. I wore my glass. I wore my specs. So I here in Chicago, the viewing was interesting. Yes. Because you couldn't see that you couldn't see without the glasses that the sun was covered at all, which was a lesson. Right? If you're looking,
was it totality?
No, we didn't get totality. We're too far north.
Okay.
Yeah, you had to be in Southern Illinois to get totality. So now I get it, right? I get why everyone rented out all the Airbnbs so they could be in totality, because it's not the same if you're not. I mean, you could see that it was just a sliver left, but without the glasses on, there was a kind of darkness, but not the sun. You still saw as a full, like, bright star, right? So unless you had the glasses, you only knew it was kind of dim for no reason, which was sort of weird, I guess, because there was no clouds, no clouds at all.
Yeah, it was like where we were at. It's probably similar to you. It looked like sunset. It was very dim, but the sun looked fully bright, because when you look at it, I mean, which I don't recommend because that was painful.
Did you stare at the sun?
I didn't stare, but I did look. Yeah. I think this is my third eclipse. So the first one, so this eclipse, I guess where it landed in line with the sun this time, was identical to the one in 1979, I think, which that was the first one I remember, and that was in California. So, and then I also saw the one 7 years ago. So this is my third one, and it's the same each time. It was just I've never seen totality.
Had you never been in yeah?
Yeah, no. I've always been the one where you see the little slivers of half moons casting shadows through the trees everywhere, which is kind of cool on its own.
I looked for that phenomenon, and I didn't see any of the shadows like that, and so I was wondering what does it take to make those half moon those half moon shadows?
So if you just stuck a pin through a piece of paper, we just used two pieces of paper. Went outside and did this, and you hold one paper with the pinhole up here and another paper down here, and the sun will shine through the pinhole. So if you have blinds and you've got a little pinhole where the string goes through the blinds, it'll shine through that and it'll leave the impression on your floor. It'll do the same thing through trees that have small leaves. We have small gaps.
Okay.
So wherever there's a very tiny gap, it'll come through and then it'll put the impression of. I don't know how that works, but it does. So that's how we saw it. And then we got back in our bunker because the end of the world was coming.
Clearly, we're on the other side of the end of the world.
Are we? I haven't been out yet. Not since.
You haven't been out yet? You're hiding in your bunker. Yes. Well, so we had this. I was on campus, and my husband made sure to have the lenses because I actually, we were talking about this before. I think he actually mainly wanted the photograph of all the people wearing them,
Oh
so
yeah,
that
that's
it looks
fun.
it looks like you're in their 3D movie.
Yeah.
So I was in my campus office and I kept sort of looking out the window and thinking, okay, that I could have just stayed in my office and looked out the window. And I said, no, I need to go out and look out from outside because this is, and I think I wasn't fully appreciating how big a deal it was to have an eclipse. And then I went
Mhm.
outside and the quad on campus was full of people. And I'm like, oh, it's a party.
It's an eclipse
It was
party.
really fun. And I found one of my friends and she was trying to look at the eclipse with the pinhole box and we didn't understand the like the optics or the mechanics of any of this. And so I was happy, I shared my glasses with her. And it was interesting that you could people could, someone came by while we were sitting there and said, "Can I borrow your glasses?" Because you couldn't see it without the glasses. If you wanted to see the
Yeah,
actual
right.
sliver, you had to look through the lenses. And
Mhm.
I think that there was a cheer and some trumpet blowing or something
Oh,
at the moment
oh
of
no,
maximum
the trumpet.
cover
No,
among the students.
see, I told you.
So I guess it's the end of the world now because we had this little lovely day outside and the world, the community came together in this act of attention to the sun.
Yes.
Yes.
Nobody looking at their phones for the first time in how long? No massive people gathered with no phones out. Well, unless they were trying to take pictures of it.
Yeah, I did take some pictures with with my
Yeah.
phone. Although I failed to find a proper way to use the lens to take the picture with the phone. So I just have a picture of what it in fact looked like rather than what the
Oh,
filtered version
yeah.
of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was actually nice the sort of, as you said, the rupture of what would happen if everybody put down their devices and simply looked at the sky.
Wouldn't that be beautiful?
That would be the end of the
Yeah.
world
If they
by
could.
now.
Yeah. Well, it would be the end of high tech's world. Don't stop using our products.
Well, I am reading it
Uh,
say it's like we may have I was thinking about this for writing Act 3 of Draco Alchemicus, where we're going to write the sort of destruction of everything in the steampunk 19th century imperial
yes.
setting. I mean, well, one, we are continuing to write. Everybody, don't worry, the story is coming along despite
Mhm.
personnel changes on the Mosaic Arc. Don't the team is still working away. We're doing image descriptions right now for Act 2.
Yes.
And we may experience the end of the world in the next year, so we better like write the end of the world in our poem so that we're like completely in conjunction with what's actually happening in the world, which is the breakdown of all tech and the end of the internet life and maybe a
Well,
return to the physical universe. That would be interesting.
that would be a beautiful thing, right? Yeah, the scariest thing I ever saw was a group of teenage girls sitting on a couch, not talking to each other. That was literally unnerving. They were guests in my home because I had a niece who was traveling with their volleyball team, and they stayed in my home. And there was about 6 or 7 of them, and nobody was talking. They were all 16 years old. I was freaked out, and it only got worse over the years. That was a long time ago. It was about 20 years ago.
That was 20
But
years ago?
yeah, well, yeah,
Did they
so
have cell
close to
phones
20 years
then?
ago. Yeah,
That's
they did. It was close to, well,
2004.
16, yeah, it was about 20 years ago, close to it. Yeah, 15 to 20 years ago.
I more like so the great break in time is about between 2004 when Facebook starts, right? And then 2007 or 8 when the iPhone starts coming in. When does it come in? And then
Oh,
suddenly everybody's living on text. Although I do remember, you're
yes.
right, that 2008, I remember I was traveling in Europe and some of my fencing friends were trying to convince me to use text messages
Right. Yeah.
because they said it was
Yeah.
cheaper, right? And I'm like, how do you do that? How do you
Oh, you're
text? I
right.
didn't
I
even know
remember.
how to
That's
text.
right.
And now we're in this world where you
Yeah.
can like type whole poems into the chat and have extended.
Yeah.
But so the girls that you're thinking of, were they actually texting each other, like sitting next to each other and conversing by way
I
of
don't think they were.
they
I
were
think
talking
they
to other
were. I think they
people?
were texting with people who weren't there. They were. It's not like they were a group of friends, but the thing is, they should have been because they were team members, right? So they were traveling for a game, and I guess they were talking to their friends who weren't there.
Mm.
But I've like a group of teenage girls, and they're sitting on the couch and they're not talking to each other. That's scary. There's something wrong here. And obviously, of course, it only got worse. And
Well,
now they allow it
maybe
in
it's
schools.
okay. You know, we were both teenage girls, and what do we talk about it with, you know, with boys? I mean, how significant is any of that?
Yeah, like, I mean, yeah, I don't know. There's no personal interaction, but they allow it in the classrooms now too, in high schools.
Texting in the
Which,
classrooms?
yeah,
Well,
they
okay,
can bring out their,
that just cuts down
yeah.
on your ability to fold the notes that you then have to try to pass.
Yeah, they're not cheating or watching movies or not paying attention. The biggest problem is that, I mean, the cheating, they can always take them away for the tests, but they're not socializing. You know,
Which is
it's
bad, which is the end of the
yeah, it's
world.
very bad.
If the young people aren't socializing, they're not doing other things that young people do and making more
Yeah, they're
people, and
right.
they'll
They're not
end up
right.
with no
They're not.
civilization whatsoever because there won't be any babies.
Yeah,
This
they're
is
not
the end
building a
of the
relationship.
world.
Yeah, yeah. I would. It wouldn't. Well, with the exception of our writing, because we do it over Telegram. Um, I would be absolutely fine with those disappearing from daily life because everybody reads them too much. It's like that excellent article you sent me today about that.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking about that, and I'm studying other streamers right now because now that we've gone, we had more views on last week's video than we've ever had on any video. I think we should level up.
How? How?
We have no idea. I'm not
What
sure
did
we
you have
can
to?
sustain that level of preparation. That took me
Yeah,
years of reading to know
that's
exactly where to point to, you guys. I will report though, since we're basically starting with gossip and the world is not yet ended, that we put a study guide up for last week's video, and that on X is getting more click-throughs than the video right now. So I am
well, that's
I am
excellent though.
actually
That's
encouraged
wonderful.
that people want the bibliography. This is good, right? It's like go
Yes,
read some books
yes.
because we can talk about it. And I do say there's a sort of, it's nice if we talk things through in this context because it is more like what you get in a class, which
Hmm.
is the oral tradition that gives you introduction to things. But then to get real, like actual knowledge, you have to go read books because it's the only medium in which you can give a sustained argument and all the
Right.
detail and everything. I don't think people get it scrolling on screens in quite the same way.
I don't think people get what kind of work goes into making those books. It's like a whole ton of work went into people going to primary sources that were centuries old
Right.
and reading the direct accounts and then diluting it and dissecting it and putting it together in a digestible format for other people to read and then discuss like we did last week. There's so much work that goes into that.
Right.
So it's amazing to me that people are saying, "What? There's books? There's a whole book about this? I'm going to go read that. That's awesome. Love that."
It's also very slow. I mean, some people write books faster than others, and some books are, easier to write faster than others. But what you're describing, that sort of comparing of sources and making judgments about which ones say truth and which ones are making it, none of them say truth directly, but maybe we could just do some
Right.
streams on how to read sources. That would be, if I could figure out our
Mm.
tech to like show you stuff online and we could like
Oh, I would
live
love
read
that.
and critique.
I would love
Oh,
that.
okay.
Yeah, I haven't done anything like that in 30 years.
Well, that would be fun. And if I could figure out how to do, if we could figure out how to do that camera wise, then we can like
Yeah,
up our engagement here. Yeah, but it seems like this would be a nice end of the world. The end of the world of the jittery sort of soundbite stuff. I have also
yeah.
been kind of disappointed that, I mean, we've gone, viral for us, which is a modest and robust number. But I really thought the kinds of things that we were talking about last week when I posted them out on the internets would get a lot more attention, perhaps, than it has. And that almost suggests to me that people are exhausted with
Mm.
I was thinking about that, and I was Xing or tweeting today saying, isn't it nice that, nobody seems to be on X anymore to hurl accusations of anti-Semitism at each other. Maybe they actually want to, fill in the blank. In our context, learn how our Lord Jesus Christ fulfilled the pattern shown to Moses on the mountain. But
Yes.
maybe people, I mean, it would be nice if we've gone through the eclipse and we're thinking about thresholds and transformations and changes. Maybe it would be super nice if everybody slowed down and wanted knowledge again. That's something
Yes,
hopeful to look for.
it
I mean,
is.
it'll cause all the social media platforms to, screech and collapse out of, having nobody
Well,
scrolling, but
unless people go on social media to discuss the books they just read. That would be
mm.
great. That would be an improvement.
Well, I'm hopeful that our two-pronged approach last week of, the video and then the reading list, people seem to like that. So maybe we should build on that.
I think so.
Hmm. Well, we were going to be more doomy today and we've gone all hopeful. How is that?
We've been criticized during our writing process for that. Too hopeful.
Well,
Oh
we're
my
just
God, not
we're
yet,
just
not
little
yet.
happy balloons, and we just bounce back up and whatever it is. So you were amusing yourself. Maybe we go to some
I
pictures and
was.
and we go to the ring of doom, right? That everyone was studying on Monday. That you were
Yeah.
entertaining yourself, looking for the signs of the end of things.
Yeah, yeah. I'm more fascinated by how people read into natural phenomena. Um, Sometimes, well, what they want to see a lot of the times, because I think people look for people look for conclusions to problems,
Mm.
or or they're afraid, and they're afraid there's going to be a conclusion to life. That we're talking about. I never know how to pronounce this right.
Millenarians.
Millenarism,
Yeah,
millenarians, right?
but millenarianism itself is a very confusing phenomenon because in Revelation that's going to be, is it Satan's bound for 1,000 years and there's a good time and then Satan gets away and then there's the end of the world. And so millenarianism is or isn't actually the end of the world. It's a little bewildering.
The end of an era,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But well, to some people, it's an actual end, right? But
But it's a melee,
natural
it's a
phenomena,
thousand. It's supposed to be actually about waiting for
yeah,
that 1,000 years.
right.
Yeah.
That seems to be the time period, right? So this is 2024. I don't want to skip ahead. I'm just doing this for context. So this is 2024. So 1,042, or yeah, 1,042 years ago, there was a comet, not an eclipse, but there was a comet
Oh, I can
that
go backward in the
descended.
slides because they loop. There we go.
Yeah.
Now I'm showing
Okay.
your last slide first.
Oh, the bio tapestry. Okay. Right. So that's 1066, and that was the year William the Conqueror conquered England.
Mm.
And 1055 in December, it might have even been on December 31st, Edward the Confessor died. And they took that as a sign that they were going to lose. But the article I was reading said, of course, he had already said he wanted William to be his successor. So there wasn't. You'll know way more about this than I will, but
Well, don't
there
worry about
wasn't
that. But
necessarily a
I'm
fight.
thinking this is a nice tie-in to last week's discussion when we were talking William the Conqueror. Well, that's a bad thing.
Yeah,
You get
right.
a comet.
Yeah, that was the funny thing. It was like he came up again in the second week. Oh, there was a comet,
It's all
and they
tying
stitched it
together.
into this
Okay, so we're
tapestry.
we're back we're back into like today, Monday's event and the
Right,
things that people are seeing about it. So what did you
right.
find when you went looking?
So, well, spooky things,
Ooh,
right?
spooky things.
So eclipses are very spooky, especially to the uneducated mind. I'm not going to say the ancient mind because they were educated on the stars. They looked at them constantly. And but to the masses, it's very scary. There's something in the sky that's always the same, right? The sun always comes up, and the moon always comes up, and they both always go down. They switch places, and then suddenly they've converged, and it's very scary. And if you're in totality, you're going to see what you see in slide number one, which looks like a giant iris. It looks
Mm,
like the eye of God staring down at you for a minute. And if you don't know any better, you probably think you're going to die, right? Because it looks dark and oppressive, and the darkness comes fairly quickly over a period of just a couple of minutes, right?
right.
That's not how sunset works unless you're on the equator, right? It's already going down. So yeah, the second slide,
Well, so just
it's just a,
that so that it comes over fast that yeah, I'm on the second slide. That was one of the things I was interested in when we were watching it. And we didn't get totality here, and you're
mhm,
looking, you can see it through the lenses that it's getting closer and closer and closer, and then it
yeah,
didn't. So that until it hits totality, in fact, it's like I said, the sun's just it like the light's weird, but the sun is still there.
yes,
And so in
yeah,
fact, if you don't know what's going on, it's getting sort of weirdly dark, and then bango, the sun's gone.
right.
So
And it affects the animals too. They go a little
oh
nuts because sunset happens. So I don't know if you saw the video a couple of days ago of the zoo in, I think it was Munich in Germany. The animals were just going crazy. They just started running around in circles, like all of them, like they
wow.
didn't know where to go
Okay,
or what
that's
to do.
interesting.
Yeah, it was interesting. Was it in Germany? It couldn't have been in Germany. It was in North America. Sorry, I'm sorry. I'm getting my continents mixed up. It was one of the major cities. Maybe it was Mexico City, but the animals were just going crazy, not knowing what to do.
Well,
Now
to be
the
fair,
you
they're
know,
animals, and they can't be
but
told
people,
here there's an eclipse
right,
coming. Are we certain
right,
that I mean the eclipses one that we from ancient astronomy that people have been able to predict them for a long time.
yes,
That's one probably so. Uh, are we sure that people are usually afraid of this? Because the one thing that people can do with other people around is say this is happening, and I remember when it happened when I was
right.
younger, which is what you did at the beginning.
Oh, I did, yeah. But now look where I was. I was, these were thousands of miles apart, right? I was in one part of the
Right.
country and then another part of the country. 2,000 years ago or 1,000 years ago, that didn't happen. You rarely left your village or county.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to disabuse
So,
you of that.
come on. No, the common person didn't travel though, did
Yeah, but the common see,
they?
yeah, we're gonna have to have a whole stream on Rachel schools Casey on the common person. I think you're
Well,
you're
I
on
mean, they,
you're on
well,
firmer ground with the animals because the animals wouldn't know, and to them it would just like go like there'd be come out of nowhere and happen, and the animals would because these total eclipses don't come very frequently. They're probably unless they're elephants, I don't know. Um,
these were
they
giraffes.
don't
Yeah.
all live long enough to experience it more than once, do they?
I don't think they would have experienced it.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think that people were screaming like the world's going to end and running around, but I think they were probably scared, unless there's somebody there telling them. And even if they were, it's like there's a difference between hearing something and experiencing it for the first time if you've never studied astronomy, right? If you're not educated, which most people weren't formally educated in that back then. So
Right, but so this
it's
is where I didn't want to go because it involves me having to do some more studying. But the no, because it's how we're imagining the ancient cities, and they're not that big, right? It's like when we're imagine. I think one of the things that happens with you're imagining history as if it's this one is not you necessarily, but
yeah,
imagining the history of the world as with the population that we have now, which of course we didn't. That big cities, I mean, the biggest city, like Rome at one point had 1 million people. Okay.
yeah.
The bigger cities in the Middle Ages were tens of thousands of people. And it's like, it's basically the population of the university campus.
Yeah, I
It's
was thinking of villages when I said that the smaller ones. I hadn't
right.
thought of the cities.
And
Like,
and then sort of, but this is a good sort of meditation. It's like saying, how did information travel? Who would have access to the kinds of information that would be able to say, the sun's going to go dark. Now, you do have some stuff that you found later on what the Aztecs did, which was
yeah,
was sun directed. So I'll give you that. But I'm now curious to think about. It's like with the Bayeux Tapestry, that's a comet, not an eclipse.
right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's a comet, not an eclipse. Yeah, there was a comet also 2 days ago, right, that you could see, and I guess it was a pretty spectacular one because of the eclipse that you could see it. So that's why I stuck the comet in there because it was another kind of spectacular
Mm.
sky show that people weren't used to seeing,
Okay. So
right?
my
And
question is, I think this is where I'd like to push you. The degree to which the ancient peoples who spent their entire lives looking at the natural world
yes,
would be, terrified by it because modernity comes up with these fantasies, right? Oh, the ancient world, and, a thunderstorm
Oh,
happens and they all go crazy, right? And you're like, they're actually living in it, whereas we're living with our heads in, our
yeah,
phones. How
in a
much are
phone.
we
Yeah.
less able to cope with these kinds of events than they were?
Well, with the comets, I think they were used to seeing, meteor showers and meteors. I don't think that was a big deal. I think the
Right.
eclipse was, if I had to take a guess, was probably a bigger deal for the masses than a comet was. And I love the way they stitched the comet into the bio tapestry because it looks like a rocket.
It does. I'm going to go back to the tapestry so people can see that.
Yeah.
It's
I was like, oh boy, the conspiracy theorists are going to love this.
Yeah, it's
There
like
are ancient aliens.
a ball with a thing and
Yeah.
flames at the back, right? Yeah, it's
But the straight edge at the bottom with the flames at the back, it looks like rockets. It looks
you're
like
right. It
rockets
does look
attached
like
to
a
the
rocket.
platform. Yeah.
Well,
It'll be on Ancient Aliens next week. Watch.
sure, 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 sure. Okay, so we're back. We got the eclipse in the trees now, and I've interrupted your stream.
Oh, that's okay. No, it's just very spooky. It's like themed for Halloween, right?
Yeah.
It's a beautiful picture. It's silvery and mysterious and if you're not educated, you don't know how it works, right? I don't know, and I don't know because I haven't read any personal accounts that may have been written about this by ancient people or any notes they might have made that weren't just pure observation of the stars and the movements of the planets. But did this is a question for you? Did most people think the Earth was flat back then?
No.
I know the
No.
educated people did not. I know they did not, but did other people?
Well, we only know what the educated people thought because they're the ones writing stuff down.
That's true.
It's a
Yeah.
closed loop of information.
Except I'm just thinking of the Columbus map now, where here be monsters or whatever it was.
Yeah, well, I
At the
always think
edge of the
those are a
world.
bit jokey. That no. So here, no. This
Troll
is
from 14th century, 15th century. That's funny.
yes, there. Yeah, that you were talking about how hard it is to write the books, and the sort of sources of evidence.
Yeah.
That when I was in graduate school back in the 1980s, the big sort of binary that people were wrestling with in my field was popular versus elite religion. Saying, oh, the superstitions of the people versus the dogmatism of the elite, and the dogmatism of the elite is always like eclipse-like trying to eat the superstition of the people, or vice versa. And then everybody realized that all the sources we had were written by elites, and so they realized we had no evidence for this purported popular stuff, right? It could be projected onto, eclipse is our metaphor here, right? You could be projecting what you fantasize the populace believes onto your elite practice, but the elites themselves held beliefs that we would think, it's like it collapsed completely. And then in the 90s, they went to the margins versus the center, and the margins were cool and grotesques and had gargoyles in them, and the center had boring doctrinal stuff in it, right? But the problem with all of this is it was always still part of the same system. And the I think one of the awakenings that we're going through now is people returning to the sense, as we talked about with Alexander a couple of weeks ago, that the invisible world is real. The world of the spirits is real, and the degree to which we consider that the superstitious, well, modernity better catch up. Right? It's been superstitiously pretending that only the material exists for too long, right?
Well, what's bothersome about that is that people say, well, if you'll say to people, it's not something that can be explained through the five senses. And they're like, oh, okay, yeah, superstition. It's like, just because you can't explain it doesn't mean it's superstition. Superstition is doing something because you think it's going to prevent bad luck. That's not what we're talking about.
That's a very accurate description. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Superstition is a sort of mini version of witchcraft or, magic. Trying to, I like that's a really good description. Trying to affect things by way of your
you're trying to cause or prevent things.
Yes,
real physical things from happening.
Right.
So we're talking about things that aren't in the physical world. That the physical world may react to, but it's not an action driven by a person.
That's good.
That's really
Yeah.
hard to explain.
Well, and that
Yeah,
where people got, get really tangled up is, of course, the difference between sacrament and magic, in theological terms, but also
right,
the difference between saying, God acts in the world. God mainly acts in the world through people. So whether we do
right.
God's will or not, right?
Yeah,
But that now I've lost my train of thought because I thought that's a good thought. God, we are the main
yeah,
instruments of God because we do, if we work in His will, that's God's will, right? So how does God
right,
act? Through us. Do what He
right,
wants.
right.
Yeah.
And yeah, we'll get into a whole nother say, how do demons act in opposition to God, but they also act in the physical world. But
They all,
yeah,
again, the demons mainly act through us too because people do stuff that they think will get
right,
the demons to give them prezzies.
right. Yeah, he's not helping you because he likes you, people. Think about that. There's no such thing as white magic. No.
This is true. There's no such thing. It's
Yeah,
all the demons trying to get you to do something that they, you are too easily convinced will be good for you, and it's not.
yeah,
And what they're mainly
yeah.
convincing you to do by way of your own acquiescence is against God's will. So there, we've solved all theological problems for today.
Okay, we're done. Bye. No.
If only people would listen to more of us on the internet.
This is
Well, I don't know. We do know women are keen on starting wars because they egg on the gangs. But um,
well, historically, the female monarchs had started more wars, I guess, than the men did.
yes, I think Queen Elizabeth by herself, the first, right? Just to
Yeah,
get a lot of them going.
yeah. But this is why I like the spooky pictures of the
Mm.
eclipse, because it's where the natural world does something that looks unnatural, and so it's almost like it's almost like a metaphor for what we're just talking about here, right? Something happens in the invisible world. Occasionally, something happens that may, if you're not educated, you can't quite explain. And I'm sure they could explain it to a large extent. They could predict it because they knew it happened. I don't think they knew the mechanics of how it happened. I think that modern scientific, study using lenses has taught how, exactly the sun's moving, the moon's moving in front of the sun, and they know the paths better because they're at different parts around the world. Does that make sense? They're mapping the stars better today,
Right,
more
but the thing is, I
accurately.
do know that the eclipse predictions have been, the people have been doing that accurately since antiquity. So it's more, I think we don't, as a general, you can think about it, if you don't have electric light, um, so when night
Mhm.
comes, you
Yeah,
simply, that's it, right? You're going to be much more aware of the movement of both the moon and the sun. I can prove
yeah,
this. I can
true.
prove this in my own attention because in high school we were given a project to watch the moon for a month. And like we had a little worksheet. This is like freshman year. We had a little worksheet and say when the moon rises and when it sets and stuff. And whether I was supposed to do it, I can't remember. But you give me a pattern of stuff to do, I'll do it. So I did it for months. I think we were literally
Yeah,
supposed to do it. Yeah,
overkill,
but
overachiever.
merely in 3 months, oh right, you can watch the movie. It's like you can watch it process around. If you do it more, you also can notice this, like what the sun processes, in terms of summer and winter. So that my
Yeah,
apartment has only south facing windows, and my office on campus faces south. I'm very aware of when the sun's overhead versus when the sun's in the to the south. And with that moon watching exercise, it was fun to realize, what it means when it's rising at full, what it means when it's at new. I think actually people without electric lights throwing their schedules off in this completely artificial way would have been much more aware of the movement of both of them.
well, yeah, maybe you can see it a lot better now. I'm thinking of that beautiful photograph, which I didn't include. I should
Mm.
have, where because people have done it before. It's common enough now with modern photography to show you have a stationary, tripod, and you're photographing the moon in different positions throughout the
Right.
year,
Yeah.
and then you superimpose them, and you can see,
yeah.
and you can see where it moves across, in an arc, and that's kind of amazing. But yeah, that's just the faster flow of information, I guess. It doesn't mean they couldn't do it, like you're pointing out. They could.
They still did,
They could
and I
do it.
think
Yeah.
we should probably study some of this for our writing. That we do have maps of that kind of that it's kind of an infinity, right?
Yeah. Right. Right.
Yes,
Right.
if you're
That's yeah.
tracking it over the course of the year, we get impatient, right? We want it in time lapse or something. No,
Right.
the people have been. It's like if you think about it, what else are we going to attend to if we're not looking at our phones?
I don't think people are
People looking at their
appreciative.
phones aren't looking at the sky.
No, people are not appreciative of how much free time the ancient man had.
True.
Right? Because as soon as we were agrarian, as soon as we had enough time to do extra stuff, because we learned how to cultivate and store food, we didn't have to move around as much, and you actually had time to do these things. You had time to specialize, and that's when you had astronomers specializing, right?
Right.
And yeah,
Well, and think about the divisions that we have of 12s in our 12 base system that comes, I mean, I haven't reviewed it yet, but it comes from Babylon.
right.
The most ancient astronomy, dividing things up into the 360 degrees and the 60s and the 12s and all of that, and the zodiac with the 12 signs and such. All of that is ancient. So
Yes.
now this is making me want to do more research. Because
Yeah.
I did a course a few years ago on the quadrivium, and that's arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. And medieval
Mhm.
astronomy is actually, I mean, it's fascinating. But one, the medieval astronomy they had to be absolutely completely precise because they had to be able
Yeah.
to predict Easter.
Oh, right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what we have are, if you see medieval calendars, and maybe we can do this, like we'll do the tech stream on how to do it. But medieval calendars, one, they were perpetual calendars, because like you have a copy in a prayer book or something like that. You don't make a new
Mhm.
book every year like we do. They had systems for tagging them so that you knew where the Sundays were in the year and what Easter year it was. And it's a whole, like it's a 19-year cycle, and with, golden years and this and that and such. And
Mhm.
ordinary people had to know how to use their calendars that way just to know when the feast days were. So
Yeah.
it was more likely that people would be aware of at least like the moon cycles than we are now, because nobody cares about what they are now unless they're like
Yeah.
doing horoscopes or something. But
Right, unless an eclipse is coming.
or they're worrying about eclipses coming. So
Or
that we
horoscopes. Yeah.
got this eclipse. It's a new moon. So 2 weeks after the full moon that first was the first full moon after the equinox, which is why we just had Easter, right? It's like they would
Yeah.
to all of this would make sense to them because they would be attending to those cycles.
Yeah. Now, that's what the modern Latin Rite Church still does, right? They still calculate Easter, but the Eastern Rite does not. They have a set. It's a fixed feast, right?
Um, no, they're both movable. It should be. It's
Oh,
always movable with respect to the moon,
Passover.
but
Hmm.
they're on different calendars.
Oh,
I'm
right.
surrounded
Okay.
by Ukrainian
Gotcha.
Orthodox and fencing, and they're still waiting on Easter, um,
Oh,
because and they were saying it's because they're on the Julian and we're on the Georgian. They're following
yeah.
the old style reckoning of it.
Right.
Another calendrical thing. Um, Easter, because it's trying to track with Passover. It's a lunar. It's the lunar
Right.
cycle as opposed to like Christmas, which is on a fixed solar date.
Gotcha. Okay. Makes sense.
So see, we are far more superstitious now than
Well,
the
yeah.
medieval monks who needed to know when Easter was, and so they make tables that predict it for hundreds of years in
Right.
the future.
That wasn't superstition. They were doing it for a very specific reason.
Right.
Right.
They need to know how,
Yeah.
because if Easter moves, right? And the thing is, it's not just like, oh wait, look, it's the equinox. Oh look, there's the full moon. Now we have need to do Easter. You need to know when to start Lent, which comes way before that.
Yeah,
right? So
right.
they have to be able to predict it in the future when to start the fast so that it's appropriate amount of time before the, like they're much better at calculating dates than we are. We just buy the calendar and, oh, what day is it?
Yeah, I did think it was interesting that the observation in the Catholic Church of the Annunciation was moved to April 8th this year
Right.
during the eclipse.
That's
I thought
because the feast fell in
because it's
Holy
Easter.
Week. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. That's why they moved it.
Yeah.
But yeah, if I were one to look for signs,
Are you one to look for signs? Let's go on to the next picture. Oh, we've got the eclipse behind the, oh, you froze. She froze right at the moment where we have the eclipse behind the Statue of Liberty looking for a sign. And you you're looking for a sign, and now we have the Statue of Liberty with the eclipse behind her head, and you're frozen. Are you coming back to life yet? Okay. It's like I'm going to take that as a sign that your internet is still at odds with our desire to stream. Well, are we looking for a sign? What's going to be eclipsed in America? Are we going to? It's like we now that I've completely disabused you of the only people looking for signs in the Middle Ages. There you are. You're alive.
I am.
For signs in the Middle Ages were clerics with too much time on their hands and a desire to like get promoted without having to, I
How
don't
would
know,
that how
be
would
nice
that
to the right people at court. I'm not
how would that
sure.
get them promoted if they were looking for a sign?
Well, the magic, right? The medieval magic that we have, the books like the angel magic and
Mhm.
such. It's got written in Latin, so it's by people who were trained in Latin, obviously. And if you look at the kind of spells they wanted, it was often things like how to, in modern terms, would be how to pass your exams without studying. Um, but also
Cliff,
obvious,
you wrote Cliff Notes.
no, I mean get the get it, it's the every student's dream, right? Get the liberal arts without having to study. Just do this ritual and fall, but you have to do the ritual perfectly, right? And
Yeah.
it may be at the risk of your eternal soul. But it also
Oh,
does seem that the clerics who would be using these things would be the ones that did not have access to power otherwise. Never mind that
oh.
maybe the higher ups had done the spells better, but
So there were actually books written by clerics about magic,
mhm.
how to,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
bad juju.
Yeah, and some of it's really bad. There's
Oh
one
my
that my
goodness.
colleague Richard Kiekefer is editor called that he published as the Necromancer's Handbook, because of course he
Hmm.
did. And it's yeah, you can see, I mean, some of it always involves first get your hoopoe, which is a kind of bird, and take it to a crossroads and then do other things, and then
Oh,
it
freaky.
is demonic in the sense that
Yeah, it
you're
is.
summoning what you hope are going to be helpful angels, but they don't help that way. If they come when you
Angels are not summoned.
know
They're
precisely.
sent by God. And if they aren't, you don't want to talk to them.
Yes, well, anyway, but what were your thoughts on Liberty's eclipse?
Yeah, I just thought if you were looking for signs, that would be a big one. Not as big as the next one, but it's a big
Oh, what,
one,
there's another one?
right?
There's an even bigger sign than that
Oh
the
yeah.
United States
It's really
has entered into its autumn years.
well, more like it just looked very Egyptian,
Oh, what, the next
I thought.
one? Here we go.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, it does. It definitely looks like it's a pyramid of some sort.
Yes, but when we were talking about the architecture of Washington, D.C. a couple of weeks ago, I had mentioned I found reference to a street map of Washington, D.C., where it shows that it maps the constellations, it maps the stars the way they're laid out.
Ah.
And so um, that they would have put it right there to perfectly match up with the moon doesn't surprise me if they were trying to be very Egyptian. So I think that was probably done on purpose. It means nothing. It's just interesting.
Well, we've
It's not going to
established the
affect some
moon
kind of
moves
magic,
around, so eventually it's going to
right?
land on top of it.
Exactly, right. But
It
yeah, I
needs to
just
land
thought
on
that
top
was
of it
it
on
was very
particular days to be really significant.
Yeah, it looked very ominous. Yeah, no, I did go to Newgrange in Ireland years ago, and that's it's older than the pyramids. It was, they think, a burial chamber, but that's one where the only entrance has a window box at the top of the door that the sun shines through on the winter solstice and comes through the window and hits the middle, and it's a very big place, and it hits the middle of the chamber, and it's a very small box, really. It's about that big, and
Okay, so
so
you
their
have just
mathematical
in one
calculations were,
example disproved everything you were saying about ancient people not getting stuff.
oh no, okay, when I said they don't, I wasn't talking about I did say educated people, this is not true for them, right? But the masses were not educated, right?
Well,
But
I
so
I
they,
think they can build tombs so that they hit the winter solstice very
okay,
accurately.
I'm married to an engineer.
I think your
He
engineer has been
won't.
feeding you lies
He
about
will. No, no,
how many.
he says no. He has nothing to do with this. I'm just saying engineers will write the instructions that other people will use to build. Doesn't mean they understand them, but they still have to follow them.
I
Have to
think we
follow the
have actually
instructions.
raised an interesting problem that we will continue to debate. Um,
Yeah. Oh, but I brought it up to say that yeah, they it was I mean, yeah, the mathematical precision is impressive because even 5,000 years later, it's still making it into the window box, even though the Earth's axis has shifted a little bit. So it's not quite in the center anymore, but they say, yeah, 5,000 years ago would have been right in the center, dead center. So yeah, that was impressive and lends credence to the theory that some of the Irish came from Egypt.
well,
But
that I think we're certain about.
yeah, yeah,
We've already established that with the iconography, right? The well,
yeah,
but
exactly. Well, yeah,
you know the
that was
people.
millennia later, but
And see,
yeah,
this also disproves your default that people didn't move around much. They did. They moved around all the time. People have feet, and they,
I know. But okay, describe all the time, okay? Because when I say all the time, I'm like in a lifetime or in 10 generations, you would have families not moving. They would stay put,
well,
right? Because it wasn't stable to move around because you wouldn't have been accepted. It was an invasion or you didn't move.
okay. I recommend reading the Cambridge medieval history. the
I
first
would like
the
to.
first thousand. Well, so I Vox was quoting something from a sentence that I recognized today, and I'm like, yes, he's getting that from the Cambridge medieval, shorter Cambridge medieval history. I mean, one of the major. This is why history is hard. Because one of the major features of these peoples wander into the story every so often, then wander back out. We have no idea where they came from or where they were before they came. And there,
Sounds like another conspiracy.
there's people moved around a lot, right? I think you could probably do a. It would be interesting. Well, we don't have any population statistics for anything earlier than maybe yesterday, but really the 19th century. But I bet of the human population, I bet most of it was wandering around for most of human, well, certainly for most of human existence. But villages are the strange thing. The people like
Hmm.
stay put. Um,
Yeah,
I mean, they're very vulnerable. You know, village. The
right.
first thing you have after you get a village is a wall. As like ancient
Yes.
villages would be have palisades around them because once you settle down and there are in somewhere in particular people want to come and steal it. It's like a
Yeah,
major feature of prehistoric life is one group of people goes and steals the stuff from another group of people, including their women.
right. Yeah.
But a lot of the early Middle Ages is the all of these tribes that kept coming in from Asia and then getting pushed further west by other tribes pushing them further west coming in from Asia, and there's just like waves of them. And so you get first the Goths come in, and then they get pushed further west by the Huns, and then the Huns get pushed further west by the Avars, and the Avars and the Slavs, and then the Magyars come, and then I think I'm missing some. I'm not sure when the Khazars come in. They're definitely part of it. And then the Turks come, and then the Mongols come, and then more Turks come. And that's just to 1453, right? That
Yeah.
people moved around a lot,
Yeah.
and that
But yeah, I mean, you're describing invasions, though, right? When I say move around, I mean just like, oh, I think I'm going to start a new village over there, and it's going to be peaceful. I'm just going to build my house, and I mean that didn't happen. If you had people, there were large movements of people, and it was usually violent, so it disrupted whatever civilization or was going on there and changed it pretty quickly, didn't it?
Um, these are good questions because it's forcing me to like think, no, wait. Um, what we think of as history is the bits that are written down, which
Yeah.
takes certain degree of stability. So that, for example, for the early Middle Ages, we don't have accounts of a lot of what happened because there's nobody sitting still long enough to write it.
Mm.
Including in Byzantium, right? That there's no major like court historian from the 7th
Oh,
century
that's
to the
surprising,
11th or
isn't
so
it?
or thereabouts. Yeah, there's a big
Why
gap in
would
the
that be?
narrative. Um, Again, this is an interesting. It's like if you look at a map of the world right now, most of it's not inhabited.
True.
There's certain regions. I mean, it's like I bet people are way more stable in India than they ever were in Europe, but maybe not. But the major populations are China and India, and then most of the world's kind of empty. I mean, even Europe, densely populated is in certain places, is only densely populated in certain places. And America is basically a desert.
It is. It's people would be most people would be shocked at how empty the country is.
Yeah,
You don't really appreciate it. I mean, you can appreciate you can look. Most people don't look out the window when they fly. I always do, but you can appreciate it more if you actually drive across it,
right.
which I've done 3 or 4 times. And yeah, there's these big expanses of nothing but antelope.
That's
This is where
Wyoming.
the deer and the antelope play. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, it's yeah, it is Wyoming actually.
nothing but antelope.
Wyoming and yeah, antelope in Wyoming and steer in Texas. Lots of lots of grassland,
Right.
and just not a lot of people there because people live in cities. That's where the work is. But
Right.
even in
And
Europe, the way they
cities are on
farmed there.
coasts and on rivers, so they're sort of clustered at
Oh,
edges.
right, yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. Yeah, I was thinking of Germany. Right,
Hmm.
the towns are clustered on the rivers. The
Right.
people still farm, but they don't live on their farms. They farm and then they live in the
Hmm.
towns. And I think that was the normal way of doing it. America's a bit different. You'll live on your farm and then your next neighbor is like 50 miles away in the more empty places, right?
Right.
They're not all like that, but there are places like that. It's just these big expanses of nothing. Yeah,
But
anyway.
so I think we've gone very philosophical tonight, which is appropriate under an eclipse. Um, that people think
I'll
of
have to think about
people.
that.
No, I live in a giant city, right? You can drive for hours and not be outside of the city. It's an entirely artificial human landscape. It's also still really small compared to the world, and it's not even that big compared to some other cities. But because people live in cities, they think of the world as a city. Like we have these images of, the heavenly Jerusalem is a city,
Right.
and so we project that cityness. In sci-fi, you can end up with whole planets or cities, right? It's like, well, yeah, that how cute. But yeah, think about it when you fly or you just see a photograph of the land. One, most of the world is water, so no people there. Even on the land, most of it is clustered on the edges of the continents. Europe is strange because it's so much peninsula, and it's so much like
Yeah.
river edges. Europe has the complicated history that it does because the landscape is jutting into the water, I think, in so many ways. Like there's got extra
Right.
peninsulas like
They're
Greece and
natural
Italy.
barriers.
Yeah, and natural edges, so you get a lot of water travel and things like that. That most of the world is not covered by cities at all. It's mainly not
Hmm.
covered by anything.
Right.
And so when we're thinking about how much of the land or how much of the world people know, you know in the Middle Ages people walked around a lot. They go on like whole trips just to, like see a saint shrine.
Right.
And
Right.
yeah, and
What's the one in Spain called? The
Compostela, Santiago de Compostela.
Compostela.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that yes, you might or might. I think it's actually this is, you think about this legally, it's actually hard to keep people staying put, which is why you make like legal situations where you belong to the land, and
Yeah.
after the
Right.
Black Death, everybody said, "You think," and then,
Yeah. I'm out of
and
here.
they
Right.
walked away, right? So,
Yeah.
right, it's people move around, and since we're very worried about the move people walking across the Rio Grande right now, Um, that is our natural ability, that people have feet.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think they have feet and they spend a lot of time looking at the sky. And
They
that's
spend a lot of time looking at the ground.
yeah, and but that's something we
Like
don't
twirling.
do, and I think this is appropriate. We started
Yeah.
thinking about how much people spend in their phones and not paying attention to the world. I had never thought of that until our conversation right now, but that's the major thing that keeps us from understanding the past is, I mean, I've certainly thought about it in terms of our attachment to technology and stuff like that, but just that we're not in the world anymore.
Yeah. It's just one distraction. It's one giant distraction containing millions of others.
Right.
Like your attention is constantly taken away from the sky, which makes an eclipse even more cool today,
Well,
right?
that's why it was okay. We'll go on to the next picture, which is the tower in Seattle. That's a great picture, the Sauron's Eye.
Oh, that's the CN Tower in Toronto.
Toronto. Um, that that's why with the eclipse got everybody outdoors and looking at the sky. It was cool.
Yeah,
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 but it could be
yeah. It was very
Sauron.
cool. Yeah, I can remember trying to watch Halley's Comet in 1985, and I apparently you could see it. I was standing outside with my father, and he's like, "There it is, right there. You see."
Mm.
I was trying really hard to see, but I just couldn't make it out. But lots of people did see it. It's a very bright comet, so that's something that gets people out, right? That and SpaceX launches are pretty cool to see too. NASA launches. They look like a giant comet. It looks like a comet in the Bayeux
Oh yeah,
Tapestry.
the rockets definitely do.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
Yeah, the
this
CN.
does attach
But
to so many of our human longings for significance. I mean, certainly the photographs you're collecting are the ones that
yeah,
it looks like this got to mean something, right?
yeah. It's got to mean something because it's so unusual,
Right.
right? Yeah. How am I lucky enough to be standing here when this happens?
Yeah.
Right. It's like Mark Twain famously was born when Halley's Comet came around and died on the same day when it came back around 75 years later.
Did he?
Right. He
Ooh,
did.
that's
Yes.
definitely
He
significant.
predicted.
That's definitely
He
significant.
predicted it was going to happen though, so that yeah, it might have been a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, like he wanted to die that time. You know, I
That's
mean, it
still
was
pretty
possible.
nifty.
Yeah, yeah. He thought it was pretty cool. Yeah, he used to joke about it,
I'm gonna die
but
when
it
the comet
actually
comes
happened.
back.
Yeah, I came in with a comet and I'll go out with it. Well, he was old. For then, he was 75 years old. It was a pretty good ripe age in 1909. I
Right.
think that was at 1910. So he did all right. But yeah, he came in a blaze of glory and left with one. So
Well, okay. So did you find anything in your exploration for pictures and significance? Did you find people saying things that they thought was meaningful about this eclipse?
um, I found people trying to ascribe some religious significance
Mm.
to it by way of unapproved prophecies, things like that. And but then of course I immediately thought of, and I think those are in some upcoming slides, of the Hale Bopp comet in 1997 that had a cult around it. It wasn't a
Mm.
Christian cult. It
Do I
was
have the
almost like a
Haley bot
sci-fi
yet?
cult.
Well, we said we got
Uh,
more cool eclipse crescent.
oh, okay, we'll get there, but yeah,
No, wait.
I found
Here's the Haley bot. I think this here's a
yeah,
dragon. Here's a dragon comet.
that's the comet that everybody could see with the naked eye when the during totality, right? Because the sky was
Oh.
dimmed enough that you could see it.
So
They
we
knew it
had
was
both an
there.
eclipse and a comet on Monday, and I missed the comet.
Yes,
Darn it.
yes, yeah, because you're looking at the sun. But yeah, if you were in totality, you would have been able to see it.
Hmm.
In between like I think it was in between Jupiter and Venus. It was scooching down that way. But it's got horns. It's the way it's naturally formed. So it's also called the mother of dragons because it occurs, I think, in an not an asteroid field. So what do you call those things? Uh, I'm blanking on the word here. It's not an asteroid shower. It's called something else.
The meteor
You know,
showers? No.
thank you. It's
Okay.
meteor shower. Yeah, it's like a draconic meteor shower or something like that. It's named after a dragon. So this is the big one in that shower. So they call it the mother of dragons, but it's also called the devil comet because when you look at it through a high-powered telescope, it looks like it's got horns the way it's shaped, right? So it's that's pretty cool.
Is it
It's
only
pretty cool
called,
because we see it.
can it be called the Mother of God? No. Okay.
No, it was called Mother of
Okay,
Dragons.
because there's I on X, because I'm like obsessively trying to get us to trend, or like even be paid attention to. For
Yeah,
there's some reason the Mother of God is trending, and I'm like, what?
the Mother of
Why?
God is trending
Yes.
for the comet.
No,
For the
just
comet.
the Mother of God, and then I clicked on that, and people are arguing about whether or not Mary's the Mother of God, and I'm like, wait a minute, we solved that one.
She is. Okay, next.
Next.
Yeah, that was solved. The church's first official feast day was Feast of the Mother of God. So
Done,
in
been there,
history,
done that. Yeah.
yes, it's quite old, that feast day.
See, this
But
is you
no,
know this is my theme of our conversation is ancient people were way smarter than modern people.
well, modern people are enthralled to technology, and as we start writing Act Three, it started in the steampunk era, didn't
Yes,
it? All
yes.
these gadgets, people were amazed at these time-saving gadgets, that could the power of steam. It was just having extra power at your fingertips for the very first time for most people, I would say, because most people didn't own a horse, right? Cars are still measured in horsepower, right? How fast they go.
Yes, but before
Um,
the machines our man extensions were horses. Oh, see what I did there.
exactly.
But no, that our man extensions, I mean there were like machines like mills,
Yeah.
like water
Right,
mills.
exactly. Right,
Water power was
right.
very
But
important in the Middle Ages.
as a personal use device,
Horses,
right?
yeah,
It was
man
the
extensions.
horse, right? And extensions, and that's a different show.
The Mosaic Arc always references itself. We're very self-referential.
Yes, and yeah, most people didn't have that because they were expensive, right?
Right.
Unless you lived in the country. So yeah, this was amazing. They were mass producing things that people could use in their own homes for the first time. So we're kind of still living in that era that started then. But they're so impressed with the power, right?
Hmm.
Look what I can do, that they forgot to think about other things besides, what physical things they could easily do. It's kind of a reduction. I think it was kind of a reduction of life down to a bunch of tasks, almost like daily tasks, which you could get done really quickly.
We should be taking notes on
And
this. Oh, right, we're recording it so we can get it. But well, no, what I like is we're spending this entire stream going, and oh, we could do a stream about that, and we could do a stream about that. It's like we walk through a portal into a whole new set of questions
the
and
Stargate,
the
yeah.
Stargate and
Oh,
the thing is so these things it would be helpful to do some discussions about like what was the past life in the past like, and I'd have to figure out how I could show you that. But we are, since we're going into with Act 3, this problem of how tech has affected everything. We should definitely do some discussion on those different effects that people are. I mean, I
yeah,
think
yeah.
that to
This,
talk about portals that we've gone through. I mean, the Industrial Revolution. I read Bill Bryson's book a few years ago on home at home, and it was this great thing about how the Industrial Revolution brought us what you're saying, all the stuff in the home, but in fact, the Industrial Revolution affects more the actual buildings than bricks,
yeah,
right, and plumbing and
chills, yeah.
windows,
Elevators,
elevate. But just
yeah.
the production of materials to make houses and tile
Mhm.
work and drapes and all these things that you think of sort of
Yeah,
ordinary home furnishings,
color,
color,
right?
dyes and
It was
paints,
revolutionized.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, people could afford colors for the first time because they were being mass produced chemically
Right.
in the late 19th century.
We
Yeah,
could go on
I think
a
green was
deep
the first
dive on
one.
all of these things and in the
You could. There's so many different directions you could go with that. I mean, it's fascinating. Steampunk era is fascinating because of that, because it was an explosion of of technology that was uh, it was achievable by the average person who was working in a city. They could buy some things, not all of it, but
Right.
they could buy some things. Whether that made their life better or not is debatable. It depends on what thing they were buying,
Well, I
I
realize
suppose.
I in my own reading and my own teaching, I've skimmed over a lot of this, and I mean to say one of the things I I appreciate from, for example, Ingalls' account of what happened in Manchester is they were boom towns. So when we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about how most of the human population really doesn't live in that big of a space, I think the urban area of the whole world is like a tiny fraction of the land, right? It's just really not
Yeah.
much of it. But the
Well, because it went vertical, right? A
that,
100 years
yeah,
ago.
but I have a map in my teaching slides of, you know, how urbanized England got very, very quickly. And to a
Yeah.
large extent, what happens in the 19th century is these boom towns shoot up. And so, I mean, it's nothing but immigrants. Like a lot of them from
Mm-hmm.
Ireland show up in Manchester, and
Mm-hmm.
they are living in conditions that, you know, even, you know, Ingalls thought were horrific, and how, you know, those filthy Irish, they live like pigs because they were all
Yeah.
coming over to work in the textile factories in Manchester.
Right. Yeah. Pay them more, they won't have to.
Well, I mean, and
Nobody thinks
eventually
about the
they
staff.
did, right?
Nobody
But
wants.
it was, and this is in 1944, so it's like before the English have starved them with the potato famine. So
1844. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, the
Yeah.
famines in 1848, right? Along with everything else.
1840. Yeah. 1847. Yeah. I
Okay.
think so. Yeah. Yep.
Well, okay. So along with ancient astronomy, we basically have to do the history of the world. Okay, that's we can do that
Easy. Easy.
as a project. Well, didn't it? I mean, did like you? I this okay. I've been thinking about all the things I miss from studying growing up. I think I'm going to go back to here's the eclipsed life, right? Didn't don't you remember just wanting to get and getting to learn everything growing up?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was the weird kid reading the dictionary and the encyclopedia
Yeah,
because I liked information.
and we have you know, with the phones, right? Phone, right? At the tip of your
Mhm.
fingers, all the knowledge in the world, and it's like, how can people be stupider?
Well, they don't know what they don't know. Isn't that what Rumsfeld said?
Yes,
Which sounded ridiculous, but I kind of get it. It's like, well, how do you know to look for something if you don't even know that you're supposed to be looking for something?
exactly. And
Right?
that I
I mean,
so yeah, another of the articles I read showed you Dan Sawyer's. Shout out to Dan because he I've met him at BaseCon. Um, when he's talking about how AI can't ask questions, it only answers questions, and it's
mhm.
us who have to come up with a question to ask. Otherwise,
Yeah.
you know, the AI is just aggregated searches with
Yeah.
patterns that one can't mean anything, because unless there's a directing purpose, like a question, which is like directing purposes questions, you know, I mean, and I think neither of the things we were reading today, we should have given you guys references, too bad. That
Show notes.
maybe we'll tell you what we're talking about. That neither of them brought up the reality that the reason human interactions matter is because there's a risk involved that we need for living,
Yeah.
right?
True.
And one is, you know, like mating. Those girls need
Hmm.
to get off their phones so they can find husbands, so they can have babies. And courtship, which we still plan to do. We promise we're going to do Bridgerton eventually, maybe after the third season airs. That, you know, courtship and the whole negotiation between the sexes is incredibly complicated. And, you know, if there's one thing we're, you know, designed to do, it's find each other to do that, right? And so all of that
Yeah.
social interaction is incredibly, and then we're also obviously designed to have the sort of communication that enables us to work together in all sorts of other ways, but primarily to
Right.
stay alive, which the machines don't care about. They have no
No.
sense of, you know, like, you know, everybody fantasizes about if like we can be in a machine, we could live forever. It's like, then you'd have no point. right? You
Yeah.
literally, why? Because all of life is driven around the need to solve problems, to not die.
Hmm. Yeah. Collaboration.
Right.
Yeah. Because even if you could do it by yourself, why would you want to? Pretty lonely.
Well, interesting.
Pretty lonely life with
Sometimes
their
I
face
think
stuck in a
people are
phone.
fantasizing all the machines so they can like never talk to anybody else. I mean, it's like I'm going to
Hmm.
have like, deep, meaningful conversations with my AI. It's like,
Do people really think that? That's
yes, I've
sad.
heard some of them talk about it. It's like well,
Oh my
maybe not have
goodness.
conversations with them, but the sort of, well, okay, that's called a book, but it's written by another
Yeah.
human being. And so you like Machiavelli famously, like, saying I spend my day, doing ordinary stuff, and then at night I put on my courtier's clothes. This is when he's in exile. I put on my courtier's clothes and I go in and I have conversations with the ancients, which he meant he was reading.
Yeah.
But that's still other people. It's still a human mind.
Yeah. I don't think people understand that AI is programmed. It's not just programmed by a collection of everybody's questions in the world. It's programmed by people who are controlling what questions get included in the algorithm, what gets excluded.
That too,
So
yeah.
it's still being controlled by somebody else. Fox is right. There's no AI. There's not going to be AI. It's not possible. There's no such thing as artificial intelligence. Intelligence requires, you know, I think it requires a soul and a mind, an independent one with a free
Free
will.
will, yeah. And volition. It requires a will.
Yeah.
And in my Christian mythology class, we were talking about angels last week. It's like the fallen angels, the mystery of them is why they would ever turn from God's will, which is tricky.
Yeah.
The scholastics never could figure it out. It's like, why? Why would they do that?
Why would you give up a great thing,
Yeah.
right?
But the sort of the whole like fundamental reality is will, the ability to choose an action, a movement.
Hmm.
So why, with that in thought, why would we want just to be able to predict all of the things that are going to happen? Because if they're predictable, then they're not willed.
Or
Or are we trying to foresee other people's wills? Hmm. That people like looking at comets for predictions, right? What do we have next? Here we have, oh, there's the comet. Oh, that's a beautiful one of the comet. In the star field.
oh yeah, because that's the is that the Christmas one, the Christmas 2021?
I'm not sure. It's the next comet. And you're
Oh, it'll say at the top. It'll say at the right at the top.
uh
It should in their real tiny lettering.
nope, maybe it's the next maybe.
No,
Now
is it
this
like
one,
bluish?
is, here's another one that has a blue and a
Yeah,
white light.
that's the
That's a Christmas one.
that's the Christmas one, right? That came around. Yeah, that came on Christmas a couple of years ago, and that was speculation about the wise men. And some of the articles I read
Mm,
were just kind of silly. Like here's the five things that could have been the Christmas star. This is and it said they could have been planets. I said no, they could not have been planets. They knew about the planets 2,000 years
right.
ago. They knew it wasn't a planet. So that's just silly. Could have been a comet. That's an interesting idea because they said they it was a new star. So
Right.
possibly, yeah. But that was one that comet that came on Christmas Day in 2021. That was what was fueling the articles. So I included that, and because it was pretty.
Well, that desire, it's like the I kind of approve this desire. It's the Arundel desire, which is okay, I'm thinking about that right now because in Christian mythology, which you guys can find if you go to Dragon Common Room study guides, link on, well, anyway, we're talking about the Advent lyrics tomorrow, and
Mm-hmm.
the Advent lyrics number 5, so there are 12 of them, and number 5 is where Tolkien got the name of his star, Arundel, right?
Oh, nice.
Because it probably means morning star because that's what the Latin antiphone that it's playing off of is its own morning star, and so it's El Arundel.
Uh,
And Arundel in Tolkien's world is, of course, the father of Elrond, right? the
Hmm.
mariner who has the Silmaril on his brow, who's therefore the star in the sky that Sam sees from the stairs of Cirith Ungol when he and Frodo are climbing up the side of the mountain. And
Mm.
he's saying, look, we're in that story. All right,
Oh,
we're in
yeah.
that same story with Arendelle, who, and he's like, and you've got some of that same starlight in the vial that Gladriel gave you, and so it's like we're part of that same adventure. So I'm actually sympathetic to the desire to say like how could we show that we were actually in that same adventure with Christ, right? With the
Yeah.
wise men.
Yeah, it would be beautiful if they knew for certain that was it,
Yeah.
because it's going to come back around again, and that would be a beautiful thing. That would, and I remember when that story first hit the news. It, yeah, kind of get you right here.
I mean, if it's Christ's star, does it come back, or is it just his? Right? It's like
Oh
maybe it
yeah,
can't be a comet for that. But
maybe
but but
right.
the
Maybe it's just unique.
but the
Yeah.
longing for that sense of we're in it. I mean, that seems to
Mhm.
me to be a hopeful.
Yeah, yeah, that is hopeful. Yeah, and that's another one of my slides. So there was a mass wedding ceremony
Oh yeah. Oh
in
no, here's we got
totality.
cicadas.
Oh,
I
I
missed this.
jumped ahead too far.
Well, no, see, now
We'll have
you
to
know
jump
why
back.
it's so hard to get these slides in the right order.
I know, I know. I can only
I'll go
guess
back to
how
go back to
the
the comet.
trajectory of the, yeah, the trajectory of the conversation. I'm only guessing at, but
It's it
yeah,
it
the
feels really
cicada.
good when they come in the right order and you're not sure how you did
I
it.
know. No, the cicadas I included in there because
Okay, we got the
it
cicadas there
showed.
are predictable, but for another reason.
Their broods 13 and 19 are hatching um, every 13 years and 17 years. Different broods of these cicadas, which bury themselves underground and live there for a decade or more, and then they appear usually one at a time. This time they're appearing twice, two different broods at the same time. The first time since Thomas Jefferson was president.
To appear at
Okay, match of
at
the
the
Statue
same
of
time.
Liberty.
Wow.
Right, at the same time. So
Yeah.
there's going to be trillions of them. There's going to be trillions of them, including around Chicago, I think. Um, Probably the farmlands around there.
We get
And
cicadas in the city too, but
well,
so
you'll
there's some in
definitely
the
get them
ground
this year.
here. Yeah.
Yeah, you'll definitely get them. They'll because yeah, they emerge and they mate and then they cannibalize each other when they can't find enough food,
Mm.
and then they die off. But and then another brood comes the next time around. I included these because yeah, they're biblical, right? People
Right.
describe them as it's going to be a biblical plague, right? Just like the moon is turning to blood. Oh, look at the corona, it's red, it's biblical,
Yeah.
right? So this is part of the reasons we're at least as Christians we're looking for signs is because of Exodus, right?
Right.
Because of the plagues in Egypt, right? Which makes it even funnier that the Washington Monument looks like Egypt at this time with a blood red moon.
Well, but I
I
think
just thought of
we
that.
found an innocent reason for wanting to. It's like we want to be in the story, right? It's like say it's like it's
Yeah.
biblical,
Yes.
which is different from saying which we are commanded not to because only the Father knows the time. Um,
Well, exactly.
the
And this
the
is what people keep missing.
the desire to figure. I mean, one, um, we may or may not get there depending on how we go carry on through the rest of the things you wanted to think about, but um people are I wrote about this problem of the projection of the end times in my first book, which we were also talking about last week. And
Mm.
one of the things I point out is how there is there people always want to feel like they're at the end of the story. This sounds
Yeah.
ironic because isn't that like the cataclysm and the destruction and the end of all things and such. Your story about Mark Twain saying he wanted to die when the comet came back, that's like really, he's a storyteller, right? That's really satisfying.
Yeah, exactly.
it
Yeah, I'm gonna have a great ending for my story.
Yes.
Yeah, I admire it. Yeah,
And so I think
the
usually when people
commitment.
are imagining, oh, the end of the world is coming, they're gleeful about it. Haven't
Yeah.
you ever
Well,
noticed
yeah.
how
Some
they're
of them are.
always they're gleeful? It's like we've predicted the end. But what you really are doing is you're wanting to say, and now we'll know what it means.
Well, I'm not sure why they want to. I mean, well, if we just exclude the charlatans who are doing this for money. I'm not sure why people are hoping it's the end, but they're always looking for signs of it's the end. Other than, again, as Christians, we're told there will be signs. We're not told to look for them. We'll just say there will be signs, right? And no, you're not. You can't predict it. So to try to predict it is, in my opinion, it sounds like probably yours too. It's sinful to try to predict when that's going to be. So people are, well, they're skating right on the edge of right and wrong here when they're trying to do that. But if I'm going to be charitable, I'm going to say they're just looking at the signs that the Bible, that Christ said would be there. Right. So that's why they're looking to the heavens.
Well,
some of them do seem a little more gleeful at the at the prospect.
Most of the people who I notice who spend a lot of time, so I do have friends that they were quite eager and interested in the apocalypse. I've got Apocalypto on here now. Should I go back to the broods? You found a map of the broods. Okay. They don't actually overlap that much, right? I'm not getting that. Yeah, they're all coming out at the same time, but the broods live in different parts of the country.
They do. They live in different parts of the country. The map I saw showed a different map I should have included. Showed it's basically all the way through Appalachia, all the way through Appalachia and up through New Jersey and New York and parts of New England, but it's very heavily in the Mid-Atlantic and the Eastern Midwest that it is.
That we're getting plagues of cicadas.
You're going to get the plagues, cicadas. Right, for a couple of weeks. Yeah, somebody asked me if they bite, and I said just each other.
Yeah. No, they're pretty big, right? They're big, several inches long and fat, right? So you definitely see them as present.
You don't want to have a bug. You don't want to have a bug phobia and be outside. And
I'm happy I don't have a bug phobia. I have other I don't like snakes, so there's that. I tend to be okay with rodents, so that's reassuring.
Yeah.
Spiders, that comes and goes. It's like
I don't want to think about those.
See, no, it's interesting which ones. Okay, so given that we're not supposed here, we got Apocalypto. Given that we are or are not supposed to be looking for signs, I think I had one friend talking about the eclipse who was very interested in the possibility that the path was, Jonah to Nineveh, and that it was on the Feast of the Annunciation officially, and therefore something significant was going to happen.
We have we that's the Bible Belt, and they named so many towns after Old Testament names. It's not surprising to me at all that it's surprising that there are only 7 Ninevehs in that sort of time.
Being named Rachel by Presbyterians, I'm in it. Right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's like that's not really a surprise.
Well, one time we were driving through all these middle Midwest towns, and I was thinking every town named Springfield, and then my husband and I looked it up, and it's like the most popular town name in the United States is not Springfield, although I thought it was. It's Franklin.
Oh, right. That does surprise me. I don't think I've ever been to a Franklin.
Apparently there are a lot of them, right? So everybody names them after Franklin, and Springfield was up there, right? I think Washington was also quite popular.
Yeah.
But there's.
I think you mentioned that before. Yeah.
There's a lot of biblical names between here and down Route 66. You get them, and Cairo. Yeah. This is like, but they say it Cairo, in Illinois. Around it's like there's the whole Little Egypt, right? Kiltz and I talked about that with Cairo and Memphis.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Along the Mississippi, that's where the Egypt is, right? So that's where the plague should be happening. Now, go back to people want to find themselves in a story that has significance. And the only way you have a story that feels like it's significant, and we're practicing this as writers too, right, is you have to have reincorporation of elements. So the thing that happened before has to come back, which Mark Twain proves nicely with his I'm born when the comet comes and I die when the comet comes. So that's clearly significant, reincorporation. But you also have to have an end. Otherwise, it's like the saying, I don't remember who said it, right? Count no man happy until his end. Solon says that or something, that until you know the fullness of the story. Like, say, the United States, we're a great, wonderful country until you get to the end. Oh, rat, right?
Party's over.
Party's over. Everybody's waking up with a hangover and realizing, wait a minute, we didn't mean that. Without an ending, you don't know what the story meant in the first place. And so my sense, there's a huge, trend in around the millennium, the first one, of responses to the fact that there was no second coming either in the year 1000 or in the year 1033.
Yeah.
I do not take it as accidental that we had, 9/11 in 2001, right? It's like this.
Oh.
And I was writing, I have this book, right, that I was writing From Judgment to Passion in 1999, 2000. I finished it right at 2001, right? And I was therefore very ready to be surrounded by people predicting, for example, Y2K, and that was going to be a portal of event that all of the computers are going to crash and not be able to deal with the date. Well, that a similar sort of thing with the calendar was happening in the Middle Ages, only what they were doing was trying desperately over several centuries to keep the year 1000 from coming. So they kept recalculating it between the Carolingian period and the year 1000.
And they thought that would work.
Didn't it? Right. No, but it...
I can't
and
argue.
then in my book, I argue, along with Richard Landis, my great colleague's suggestion about the apocalypticism, that in fact what changed was their conception of Christ, right? That they go from this very Christ in majesty coming at judgment focus to the suffering Christ on the cross. That's the title of my book, From Judgment to Passion, right? I think I could do the judgment part better now. I have more understanding of the Majestas, the image of Christ in majesty, but they shift over the course of the 11th century very pointedly to images that we're more familiar with from the later Middle Ages of the suffering crucified, the weeping Mary and the suffering crucified Christ, which was not a feature of the iconography in the early Middle Ages.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder how bad the plagues were in the early Middle Ages compared to the later Middle Ages, and whether or not that influenced it.
No.
The iconography.
No.
Not at all.
No, because the plague that hits in the early Middle Ages is under Justinian, and the iconography doesn't change in those ways. And then the Black Death is long after the shift, right? So no, the plagues have nothing to do with it. It's the calendar.
That is fascinating. It's the calendar. Wow.
Because there's actually sensitive, my argument, following Richard, right, is they're sensitive to this sense of meaning in the date.
Mm. Yeah.
Which I think we're still in AD 2024, guys. Get a grip. Anno Domini. There's no common era except for dating from the incarnation.
It's the Christian era.
It's the Christian era, right? It's Anno Domini in the year of our Lord, incarnation 2024.
Yeah.
And to the degree that we use our sense of time to mark significance, we're playing off of that desire for meaning in bounded. It's like saying if we're telling stories of history, even within the field of academic history or something. You have ancient history, medieval history, modern history, and the fields can get really sort of stuck in believing the periodizations because they're so fixed on, in the early Middle Ages, and it transforms into that, and then there's the high point, and then it falls. And it's like that's a narrative. It's an interpretation.
Yeah. It's probably. I don't know if fluid's the right word I'm looking for here. It probably isn't that exact. It was this and then it was that. Right? There was a lot of things happening in between to change the perspective.
The only thing that you can get, only thing you can get historians agitated over in a predictable way is periodization arguments. It's when did the Middle Ages end? What do you mean? Right? It's not a real thing. It's a conceptual border that you're giving the story that you're telling.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, when the industrial age began, it was with the invention of the steam engine. That's really easy. So they want to take that kind of easy thing and apply it backwards to different periods in time to wrap their heads around it. That's my theory anyway.
Oh, my sweet summer child. Don't you know, given them's fighting words, it's like, what do you mean it was with that? No, it had to start with it, right? You see the cause and effect
Or the cotton
narrative
gin,
is,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's perpetually negotiable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Apocalypto, talk about that.
Yeah, that first of all, that image is pretty stunning. That's an amazing film. I recommend everybody watch it. If you like history, watch it. It is gruesome, but I think it needed to be because there were historical arguments being made against the reality that the Aztecs did human sacrifice on a massive scale.
To
I remember
feed the
when this movie
sun.
was to feed the sun, right? And there is an eclipse in the movie, which is shown in the picture, which is supposed to be to portend something important. Now, I think the priests, if I can remember this right, the Aztec priests they know it's coming, and they're using it to keep controlling the people.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we need to feed it more. We need to chase the jaguar away, right? So the Aztecs believed that it was a jaguar that would swallow the sun, and they needed to make lots of noise and sacrifices to get rid of it. And the protagonist, one of the people they captured, they raided his village and captured everybody, and they were going to sacrifice the men. And I think they just sold the women into slavery or killed them. But right there, he was named Jaguar Paw, so that was pretty significant. I thought it was pretty awesome. So this happened. The entire movie happens on the cusp of the Spanish landing in Mexico, and that's all I'm going to say because I don't want to give any spoilers. But that's the era. So there's no Spaniards in the movie until like almost not at all. Right? This is
They
about the
come
Aztec
at the very end.
civilization.
Yeah, it's entirely.
I didn't want to give the spoiler, but yeah, it's an old enough movie.
It's an old enough movie.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's super powerful. So
super poignant. Yeah, it's really amazing. Gibson is an absolute genius. He really is. So the whole movie is about the Aztec civilization, the end of it. This is the end of the civilization, and there's an eclipse in it. Now the Spanish wrote that came to Mexico and colonized it. They were educated. They knew how to write, meaning they knew how to write in Spanish. They were writing in Spanish or Latin. I guess the priests would have been writing Latin. They wrote about a comet.
Is that what you have
right
next?
Before then. Yes. That's the next one. So this is from a manuscript that was written. I think that one was taken from a Dominican friar. It might have been a Dominican friar or a Jesuit, one or the other. I can't remember which one. Sorry. And it was thought to portend something important to the Aztecs. This is what the Aztecs thought, and it turned out they were right because that particular comet came in the right span of time. Now he's writing descriptions that the natives had given him of this comet that happened sometime between the year 1515 and 1519.
Right.
So the Apocalypto takes place in 1519 when the Spanish landed there. So anyway, go see it. Rented, great movie. Oh my goodness, it's good. And I included that because it's an example of sometimes people are right.
Well, yeah,
wrong. It doesn't never portended something important happening or something catastrophic happening like in 1066 or in 1519, right? I guess you could say, well, yeah, you wait long enough and something important is going to happen on, coincide with a comet or an eclipse or both. But
yeah, this is a problem with coincidence. And with the AI, right? We're saying that what we are really good at is putting patterns together and making them meaningful.
Yeah.
And you're going to find something meaningful to put together. Like you were just saying, it's like, oh, well, all those towns are named Nineveh because of who settled there and named the towns.
Right.
Not so that, in 2024, there'd be a comet that passed through all of them.
Well, if you really want to see a freaky pattern, go look at all of the, if you go to my Twitter page, I have it as the banner at the top. It's the axis of Saint Michael.
Yes,
These
yes.
are all the Saint Michael churches that were built over more than a 1,000 year period that line up perfectly in a perfect line.
Yeah, so
Like
I guess
somebody
there's
planned it
plenty of
out.
St. Michael, so just like pick enough of them and
Yeah.
make a line. You want it to mean something, don't you?
I know about that one because they were all of these St. Michaels were put on places where Apollo was worshipped. Now that wasn't that uncommon either. They would put churches over places where pagan gods had previously been honored for a reason, right? They were replacing the religion with Christianity. But yeah, it's pretty fascinating.
Okay, we're gonna do a stream. This stream is nothing about our predictions on what we're gonna have to talk about next. We could do a study of all those St. Michael churches and
That'd be
see
cool.
exactly what's going on in
The ley
that
line,
picture.
right?
That would be
Called the ley line.
that'd actually be a nice little exercise of
Yeah.
okay.
Do it on the Feast of St. Michael. That'd be cool.
Okay, we got time to plan for that because that's not until September.
Right.
So I don't know, right? It's like I'm an inveterate. This the whole point of the Mosaic Arc is to find patterns and significance in stories, and certainly we enjoy the sense of things coming together and being meaningful. Where our discussion is testing my limits on various things, and I realize I'm very happy to have meaningfulness in the scriptures coming together in story and being fulfilled. I'm more orthodox than I realized. But I'm not actually happy about I'm disinclined to find the ooh cool, all of these things coincide, line up arguments.
Mm-hmm.
In either coincidence in time or in space, right? So, like I think people settle where they do because there's rivers and like ports and stuff.
Oh, they do, but the names were taken because they were Bible believing Christians, and they took their names from the Bible. So,
right, but it's a nice exercise of saying at what point are we looking for what level of meaning in these phenomenon, either our artifacts or the movement of the movement of the bodies in the heavens as one astrology would say, okay, so there's two different ways of thinking about it, that they're predictive of us, which would be problematic because we should have free will. The other is that we're actually affected by them.
Yeah, this is a discussion for Captain Zodiac again. I know I'll have to go back and watch that because he was discussing with you in Kilts.
Right.
Was it a year ago?
Almost a year ago, yeah.
Yeah, what astrology is supposed to be showing, and it isn't supposed to be predicting. According to him, it is not supposed to be predicting what's going to happen in your life.
Right.
So, but I wasn't really clear on what it was supposed to do. I'll have to go watch that again. Give it a listen.
So the thing is, now I'm showing the wedding with the eclipse, I think.
Oh, right. So, right. It's not always, I went from apocalyptic to here's a nice mass wedding in Texas. Wedding.
I think I'm desperately trying to figure out what the story arc here is in your pictures.
Well, right. It's people looking for signs, but sometimes people see this is a great sign. Let's get married, so it'll be very memorable. Like, so we got married on the great eclipse. It's
right.
It was just So I didn't see a whole lot of superstition out there, even though I was looking for it. I saw a lot more red heifer stories happening on Monday than I did about the eclipse. The eclipse was almost like an afterthought, which was kind of weird, I thought.
Did they not? Did they choose? Have they done the red heifer sacrifice now?
They did, yeah.
Oh,
I think they did it today.
Wait, and actually. The world is still here. Wait, no, we're in real trouble now. We had an eclipse, the Feast of the Annunciation, and the red heifer sacrifice, and we're still sitting here talking as if it's ordinary. How is this possible?
According to LifeSite News, it was. Oh my gosh, I can't remember that man's name. He does all of the interviews on there. John Henry Weston. So he was interviewing somebody about it. Basically, they need these red heifers to burn them and mix it with water. It has something to do with giving them the ability for purification for the third temple.
Right.
They have this little problem called the Al-Aqsa Mosque, but right, they'll just get rid of that, right? I don't think they will. I don't think they can. But so it's just a provocation, and they were tying it to October 7th, and saying that's why they attacked when they did. That's a whole nother subject, which we shouldn't get into because it would take too long. But yeah, people were trying to make all these things converge. Like, oh, it's this red heifer thing, and it's a big eclipse that hasn't happened since 1979. Oh, wait a minute, we had another one 7 years earlier. Well, no, let's focus on this.
Right.
And there's a comet too, and it's called the Devil Comet, right?
Yeah.
They seem to be wanting to make it spooky, and I just liked that there was this group of people who said, "Nah, it's a party. Let's get married." But they were still looking for meaning in it, and not just they weren't looking for evil meaning or spooky meaning. It was just fun, hey, that's cool. We got married during an eclipse. I didn't interview these couples. There was a whole bunch of them. Maybe some of them did think that, but that wasn't the mood of the picture. I just liked the picture.
But this is a nice place to have gotten to, is that this hunger for meaning.
Yes.
If only it meant, it's like, it really, wouldn't it be great if it did mean something?
Yeah.
I mean, that's in my argument about the year 1000. It's like people do get they get anxious and frightened around apocalyptic in the sense of revelatory of the end events, but they also love them because it feels significant. It feels like there's going to be not just yet more of the same thing, which is, again, the difference between us and the AI of looking for patterns, right? The AI is just designed to find patterns, but they don't mean anything, which is why I guess it says the AI programs can hallucinate meanings and patterns, because I wasn't paying attention. I'm not going to take it as meaningful. Whereas we're desperately studying that the heavens, interestingly, are very regular, so that we can do these predictive things like have Easter by way of these. Right. Well, we are, so I think we're still sort of default religious, which is always, now, oh, you're blinking in and out. That
I'm back now.
Modernity is always trying to tell us, I mean, that's what the Enlightenment's claim was. It's like religion is bunk. And Marx goes, oh, it's the opium of the masses and things like that. It's like, no, it's the actual meaning of life. So, right. And it is always hopeful when it's the meaning of life. It's the meaning of desire for life and being. I really enjoyed the eclipse on Monday because everybody was out there in the quad looking at the sky and being there together in this shared experience.
Yeah, and there are few of those these days, and when you have something that can't be ignored because it's right over your head and on fire.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool. We used to live in societies where it's Easter. You can't ignore that either because it's everywhere, because everybody's celebrating it and singing about it and having the mass for it and having processions for it. None of that exists in most places anymore. You can't ignore the sun and the moon though. So that was pretty cool. It's significant. So yeah, that search for significance. This is a significant event and I'm here for it. And that's really cool.
Yeah, it was nice for the students because I think everybody let them out of class.
Oh, that's nice. That's good.
Just, oh wait, this is actually really cool. And the feeling of it being cool fed that feeling too. It's like, this is we get to collectively attend to this moment.
Mm-hmm.
Again, so it keeps coming up, this contrast between what it was like before and after, which I'm realizing I mean, it's one for our writing in Draco Chemicus is very significant. It's like we're trying to get to that point of how everything broke.
Well, you know what's interesting, as I just thought about now in Act One, which has been out for a while. I've noticed that
Here's
all of the
Act One, buy
characters,
our book.
yes, all of the characters we introduced, they have a deep longing to be significant, to live significant
Mm-hmm.
lives,
Mm-hmm.
and it really drives them, and not in good ways
Oh
because they don't
yes,
know how to do
and
it.
by the way, guys, we spend all the time thinking about the planets because our characters are.
Hmm.
um, right? And you're saying they want to be significant in the way in which they're shown in
Yeah,
the diagram of the heavens, right?
right.
And that we
These are people with big personalities,
right,
and they match the big personalities of planets,
right.
right? And but yeah, this they have an incredibly strong and deep need to be significant, to be somebody. Yeah,
Hmm.
there's your story arc.
Oh yes,
It's significance.
we well indeed, right? And I'd say that's the mythological longing that we have. I mean, going back to the leopard eating the sun or not, it's the I was thinking about this with the AI and the problem of what makes life meaningful, and it's obviously challenges to surmount, whether it's courtship or building a house or fighting off the beasties. Um, Somehow we've got to have a better world where the younger people have something to do other than, I mean, frankly, play games on their phones, which are like this artificial competition for you, which is obviously why they're so attractive, right? But then games, sort of games of all sorts absorb you in artificial competition, and I don't think games as such are bad.
Well, what's one of the more
Look
popular
what your
ones,
next
right?
slide is. Oh, it's more comet.
Oh, which one is
This
it?
is very long and skinny. It looks like multiple comets. How is that possible?
Oh, okay. That's sorry. Is this just side by side? Right. So one's a close up of the Devil Comet where you can see the horns.
No, this is one picture.
Huh. Wonder which one that is. Sorry, I don't remember.
Okay, here are we about to Halley's? It's one before Halley's Comet. So see, that's why it shows up in the Bayou Tapestry, right? It's like, look, there, it's meaningful, and they're all pointing to it and saying, we have
Yes.
reached a point in the story that we can show something big is happening.
Well, that's what's fascinating about that is everybody in the tapestry is pointing up at the sky, right? And God's in the sky is pointing down at the cathedral,
Mm,
which is kind of interesting. Now they said he was pointing at because that's where Edward was buried,
okay.
but maybe the significance there is stop looking at the comet, start praying. I don't know.
Well, so most because medieval clerics were warned by Augustine, at least in the West, not to try to calculate the times, and were told over and over, no, you're not supposed to, and
Mhm.
that's one of the reasons that the scholarship has tended to say no, nobody would have been worried about the year 1000, aside from the fact that apocalyptic moments and expectations like recur every generation throughout the Middle Ages. So in fact, they were looking for them all the time. So definitely at a year 1000 and 1033, which is conveniently a generation apart, but also in
Right.
1065 when it happened that, Good Friday coincides with the Annunciation. There's other coincidences that they're looking for. It's like, well, it's got to be this, it's got to be that. And
Yeah.
what we do know is about once every generation, one of these sort of crises happens that people become convinced that it's all, over. And
Yeah.
what I say is that that's not an argument for saying they didn't calculate, or it's like, oh, it was common. It's like, no, it cycles every generation, which shows you what, sort of memory and time and lifespan are like.
Hmm.
That we have social crises at points as much, I think, it's curious because, some of them, us in this conspiracy world, will say are engineered by our overlords. But there's also a way in which it happens generationally because this kind of feel of meaningfulness seems to cycle too.
Mm.
My theory,
Mm.
right? So, this was the argument. I'm paraphrasing to a certain extent Frank Kermode, who wrote a book called The Sense of an Ending, like why a prophecy appeals and what it gives to us.
Mm-hmm.
He says it's sort of putting yourself in a particular kind of structure, but I say that this is not the whole story. Narratives and prophecies in which history is brought to an end, time brought to a stop, console not only in that they give shape to the time of one's present existence, they also give shape to the pointlessness of one's mortality, to the pointless and yet inescapable experience of dissolution, change, death, and decay, to which all human beings are inexorably subject. In other
I
words,
agree.
to the pointlessness of evil. In the Christian narrative, the end of time is revealed by God through prophecies and signs. The apocalypse brings an end not only to the anxious and otherwise formless labors and strivings of humankind, but also to their struggles with the evils of earthly existence. More important, it brings these struggles to a just end, to a resolution in which evil is defeated and good recompensed, to a resolution in which judgment simultaneously annuls time and redeems those
Mm.
subject to it. This is not to
Wow.
say, however, that the prospect of judgment, like the prospect of knowing when the end to the narrative will come, is itself an unambiguous consolation. Just as some prefer to cast themselves towards the end of the narrative, but not in the last chapter, so others find the prospect of judgment comforting, only, as Augustine said, not yet. Um, right. So you're feeling about, the judgment's going to come, and some people like that idea, and it'll bring,
Hopeful. Yeah.
hopeful, and others, it's consoling. It'll probably happen eventually, but not yet, right?
Yeah.
And what Richard Landis came up with is that they're owls and roosters, the degree to which they say it's going to happen, sort of at dusk, and those which are crowing constantly and saying, "Oh, it's about to happen, it's about to happen," and that we
Yeah.
seem to have socially both kinds, sort of constantly with us, but
The end is nigh.
the end is nigh, right? But that the end of our slides is now here, and we are back to the beginning. But that we are, I mean, the looking for signs, I say, is this looking for significance and narrative, and wanting to mark significant moments, which it was interesting when you're bringing up, like, people used to have the whole town given over to a particular religious festival, and because of our cosmopolitan nature of our cities now, and the fact that, for example, we have Christians on two different calendars living in the same city,
Oh, yeah.
there's very little sense, other than, guess what, on the day of the eclipse, that we all come together in the same
Right.
moment over something that simply, praise God in the heavens.
Right. Yeah. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
It'd be awesome if we could share the Easter. That would be great.
It would yes, if the patriarch and the pope decide that we should but there still be people who won't celebrate it together with them, and Mel Gibson might be one of them,
I'm
since he
not
doesn't go.
I'm not gonna.
I'm not gonna. So
I don't want to
thanks
talk
be
about
to
it.
God that on Monday this week we all got to go outside at 2 p.m. and share a little sunshine together. It was
Yeah,
really, like, lovely and glorious.
it was. It was a beautiful thing. It's not brought to you by any government, just God himself. Here you go.
God himself. Here
Enjoy.
we have a phenomenon to remind us of the beauty of, and it was beautiful. It was beautiful to have. I mean, it was a beautiful day here, and it was warm. So
Yeah,
it was
here
like
too.
the
Yeah.
first, like, real nice day that we'd had, and everybody got to be
Nice.
out for a little bit. And yeah, we it'd be nice to have a more occasions, regular occasions to look forward to, that had that level of, I don't know. I mean, it's also the students were also, of course, struck by it because the next one that will come through in this band won't be for 20 years. So
Yeah.
you have that sense of rarity, which also matters. We live
Hmm.
too much in surfeit of apparent, blockbuster events. And this one, no, it's not going to
Right.
come back for another 20 years.
Yep. Patience is a virtue.
Yeah. Well, we'll be back next week. Although I think we said we're going to try a different time. We're still trying to find the best time for our new season of conversations. And now, thanks to the eclipse, we have projected all sorts of other topics that we're going to have to deal with and how to think about. And I want to figure out better, not better, just different ways that we can do sort of on the spot exploring through the internet. But I don't know how to make you be able to see it since you can't see what I'm showing.
Yeah, you got to figure out a green screen, but then you lose all the cool artifacts behind you. So I hate to miss those.
Oh well, I think it would not be for every scene, just like when we're searching the
Ah,
web or something like that. But I don't know how to
that
do
would be
it yet.
fun.
I don't know how to mask. I don't know. It's
Got to figure it out. That'd be fun.
we will consider the possibilities of our virtual tea room. Anyway, if you like our video today, and if you watched the one last week, please come back, subscribe, like. One day, when you head over to Unauthorized, you'll be able to give us money again. Although apparently the payment processors are still in process of being redesigned. Buy our books. Watch for our newsletter. We'll give you reading recommendations because there's always more to dive into.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you for taking us through the possibility of significance.
Yes, I'll leave my bunker now. I'm feeling more secure.
Oh, good. Go back out into the world. Because
Going to the out
I
now.
live in the dog park on a regular basis. I'm telling you, those of us with dogs, rain, shine, eclipses, not eclipses, there's the world out there. You should get a dog.
Should.
And with that thought, good night, everyone.